The Chicago Juvenile Court began in 1899, and at this point in time, the treatment, re-education, and rehabilitation of the children was in the best interest of the child. Children were viewed as more malleable in their young age, and with this treatment, they could become better citizens and therefore contribute to society. Belief of rehabilitation decreased over time, which was especially present in the late 1960s. Children were seen as more autonomous and responsible for their own actions, and therefore there were harsher sentences. The new economic, social, and cultural changes, such as internal migration, increase in diversity, less tolerance, and increased urbanization, led to the bias in which more poor and ethnic groups were sent to the system. This further proved that the juvenile system had turned into something that was not what it was supposed to be, with its initial goals of helping children and rehabilitating them so they could be part of society. The concept of autonomy with children was further demonstrated in 1994 with Gun-Free Schools Act, which implemented a zero-tolerance policy towards students possessing a handgun on school property. Of course, this was a necessary act, but since then this has been changed, and therefore the zero-tolerance policy has caused an uproar. An example of the abuse of power that the Zero Tolerance Act implements is an occurrence in which a 6-year-old African-American child was suspended for 10 days for bringing a toenail clipper to school. A school board member said, "This is not about a toenail clipper, this is about the attachment on the toenail clippers." This obviously shows that the zero tolerance policy has been changed over the years. This incident was not as recent, but in 2000, which was only 18 years ago. There has been change since then, but this demonstrates that the zero-tolerance policy is not a good way to deal with children. The zero-tolerance policy causes an increase in suspensions, which is what that policy implements, and the increase in suspension leads to poor math and reading rates in children with more suspensions because they, of course, are not able to attend school. One major misconception about the restorative justice system is that it is too good for offenders, when in reality it increases the rates of victim and offender satisfaction. This is viewed as not being a good policy in the sense that it aids the offenders too much, when instead it just rehabilitates them and allows them to be a part of society and to take responsibility for their actions. This misconception is not only reflected in the zero-tolerance policy, but also in politics. In the recent past, in the political campaigns, it is almost necessary for a politician to be hard on crime. If they're not hard on crime and they support more rehabilitative policies for prisoners and convicts, then they would be seen as being too harsh on the victim and instead granting the convicts a bit more leniency. This concept can be represented in the 1988 election between Republican H.W. Bush and Democrat Michael Dukakis. Bush utilized the infamous Willie Horton ad to strike fear into white America and women, to show that Michael Dukakis was too easy on crime and to punish him for almost attempting to rehabilitate the convicts. A solution to this problem would be restorative justice. Restorative justice can be seen in many forms, but a common form would be a mediator will guide the discussion by allowing all parties to explain what happened to gain a common understanding of the incident. Then the mediator will discuss who was affected and how these parties were harmed by the actions. Finally, participants ask how to deal the harm by suggesting reparations that may include apologies, community service, or compensation. Restorative justice allows the balance to be restored by taking or compensating the suffering and harm caused by the crime. Victims feel that their victimization has been taken seriously and that the compensation and support are reasonable and balanced with the suffering and losses. and the offenders themselves experience that their dignity has not necessarily been hurt and that they are given the opportunity to make up for their mistake in a constructive way. Offenders are more fairly treated and accept their outcomes due to this. The process of restorative justice has been proven to work in both national and local areas. In Oakland, California, schools used restorative justice to decrease chronic absences by 24%, increase ninth grade reading levels by 128%, and resulted also in a 56% decline in high school dropouts. Furthermore, the reforming of the disciplinary system in schools resulted in helping the problem of the disproportionate amount of minorities that are disciplined in these schools. In San Francisco, California, Sandra Lee Feuer, an American politician, supported restorative justice in order to reform our justice system. She utilized her position on the San Francisco Board of Supervisors to implement restorative justice in schools because, as she stated, 60% of inmates in the San Francisco County Jail have been students in the San Francisco public school system, and the majority of them are people of color. We just knew we had to somehow stop this schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline. However, currently we do not utilize the restorative justice policies to decrease suspensions. Through the Club SOAR, we would like to implement these policies by asking the head of this club or teacher representative, Miss Ekstrand, to notify the board in order to implement these actions at Glenbrook South High School. At Glenbrook South High School, we do not implement the zero tolerance policy. Instead, Fagel claims South's policy already align with the new aspect of the law, which requires Illinois school officials to limit the number of suspensions and expulsions to the greatest extent possible. Fagel says that we must do this in order to address the problem itself. As of right now, these policies are not being implemented due to the fact that the school year is basically over. But the first guidelines that should be set to implement these rules would be setting clear rules and educating the faculty of these new policies. And after these actions are done, the school should implement a wide range of programs, including peer courts, conflict resolution programs, early interventions, mentoring, mediations, and character education programs to promote a mutually respectful and collaborative school climate and teach students and teachers how to handle and resolve conflicts in an appropriate way. Restorative action is vital in order to re-educate and rehabilitate people, and especially students, before they reach the point in which they can be placed in disciplinary systems.